My name is Royce. I'm with redeyeroyce.com. That's my blog. I blog about coffee and travel, hence the name Red Eye Royce, right? It's red eye as in the early morning flights to get somewhere, and also that's how you feel before you have your first cup of coffee, right? Your eyes are a little bloodshot, you need a little coffee. So it's a blog about coffee. It's a blog about travel, where you can get good coffee out in the world and how you can get that good coffee in your home as well. So I'm meeting today with David with Kingdom Bean Roasters. That's
Kingdom Bean Coffee Roastery.
Kingdom Bean Coffee Roastery. Yep. That's right. So thank you for meeting with me today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
So why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Sure.
What got you into the coffee industry? Share your passion a little bit.
Sure. I grew up in a family that my parents just drank Folgers and drank gas station coffee, and I always just thought, ooh, coffee is bitter. I don't want it.
I had the same experience actually.
Yeah. And so, I grew up not really drinking coffee. Even when I got into college, I never drank coffee. And I went to live in Laos in Southeast Asia. I worked for an agriculture company there. And then later met my wife, who was from Laos. And we decided to start a new company to help, impoverished upland farmers. And I was really looking for a way to promote a cash crop to upland farmers and former growers of opium, and considered different possibilities and discovered that coffee was actually a good option. So I actually kind of got into coffee through the back door, so to speak, because I was looking for a way to help farmers, and coffee was the cash crop that kind of fit the bill, that checked all the boxes. And so because of that, that's when I started drinking coffee. It was like, okay, I'm going to get into the coffee business. I better know a little bit about the product.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it kind of started as a business before it was a passion for the drink itself.
Yeah, I saw how coffee could really help, because coffee, since these people couldn't grow opium anymore, they were kind of resigned just to do slash and burn agriculture and to plant corn and upland rice and really just fall into subsistence farming and poverty. And so coffee could give them 4 times as much the income as those other crops could. Maybe not quite to the level of opium, but at least coffee's legal.
Yeah.
And so I was not a coffee lover. Like, oh, I love coffee. I want to be in the coffee business. Where can I go plant coffee? It was kind of the other way around. And so that's when I got into coffee, started drinking it, kind of learned about the whole world of coffee. What is specialty coffee? What's the difference between Robusta and Arabica and all those kind of things.
Good.
So, yeah.
Good. Well, I met you at the Flea Off Market in Louisville, Kentucky, and you are currently in Louisville, Kentucky. That's where
right.
Kingdom Bean is. And one of the things that stuck out to me when I met you was that you had Thai coffee, which we're enjoying a cup of right now. That really stuck out to me. I just never seen that. So can you talk to me about the source of your coffee? It seems like you're closely tied to the growers.
Yeah.
Talk to me about your coffee.
Yeah. Well, we have altogether we have 8 different coffees that we're selling online through our website, kingdombeancoffee.com. And but I'm really connected with about 4 or 5 of these coffees specifically. And most of those are in Asia. And so a lot of the world hasn't heard of Asian coffee so much. I mean, you think of coffee, you think of Brazil, you think of Central America, or you think of East Africa, where coffee comes from. And
that was my first foray into gourmet coffee was Ethiopian coffee. That holds a special place in my heart.
Yeah,
so.
And Eastern Africa has some of the best coffee in the world, in my opinion. You just get the real floral and fruity notes that come out of the coffees there, and so you like to roast those lighter to maintain that. And whereas in Central South America, you just kind of get that nutty, malty, chocolatey, more kind of the base coffee that people use for a lot. But Asia is a wild card in a lot of ways, and there's a lot of bad coffee coming out of Asia. In particular, out of Vietnam is the largest Robusta producing country in the world. And so most people have never even heard of Asian coffee besides perhaps, Java or Sumatra. But up in Indochina, most people have never even heard of coffee up there. And if they have, it's usually the bad stuff that's coming out. And so we really specialize in higher quality Asian coffees. And I feel excited to be able to introduce these coffees to the American market, to the world, because there's some real special and unique coffees. And so in Thailand, we have this Thai Bonzo coffee that's coming from the Chiang Rai area, from the Doi Chang, the Elephant Mountain in northern Chiang Rai, Thailand. And it's grown by the Aka people. And my friend Pat is the owner of that business. He's a Thai Aka person, actually. And they grow coffee at 1,600 meters above sea level. And they wash it, so it's all, a wet process coffee. And it produces just a really good, balanced, very, very light, mild acidity, if any at all. Just a good cup of coffee. And their project helps the women, because in Thailand is known for its sex trade and human trafficking. And unfortunately, that's, something terrible that's happening there. And a lot of the impoverished tribal peoples are the ones who get trafficked down to Bangkok, where that's kind of the heart of the sex industry. And Pat's company, Thai Bonzo, is able to help some of these women come back and have a legitimate, sustainable occupation with dignity, and they help sort the coffee beans. And so that's the part of the social aspect of the Thai Bonzo coffee that he's doing there. And so we love those kind of initiatives, that one, have good coffee, so it meets our quality standards, and two, is making a good impact in people's lives in the world too.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what's happening with the Thai coffee. The company that I started in Laos, which is Saffron Coffee, as I mentioned earlier, our big thing was helping to assist upland farmers who all used to grow opium. Laos, Thailand, Burma, that's known as the Golden Triangle. That's where in ages past, where the majority of the opium in the world came from that region. And all of the farmers that we plant coffee with, over 800 families, all of them used to grow opium in the past, until the government said, you can't do it anymore, it's illegal. And so they were, as I mentioned before, they resigned themselves to doing subsistence agriculture, because what a lot of people don't understand is that in Southeast Asia, the rice paddies, those are the lowland farmers. And rice paddies are on flat land. They produce 4 times as much a yield as the upland crops do on the mountainsides. And literally, just like you see these mountains here, that they plant on these slopes. Mm-hmm. And they can only plant during the rainy season, because that's the only time it has water. And those are the poor farmers. That doesn't yield as much. There's a lot of rocks, but you can grow coffee. Okay. And so that's what we did. That's how we helped out to make an impact on people's lives.
So I think on your website, you talk about having Arabica high-grown or high elevation shade-grown coffee. Can you tell me about that? I'm still learning a lot about coffee, so there's a lot of terms there that need definition for me.
Yeah, for Laos saffron coffee, which again, we're in the process of importing a ton of this coffee at the current time. So hopefully at the end of May, we will have Laos saffron coffee available on our website again. We ran out of it because it was so popular. We have 3 or 4 things that were very important for us, that we would not purchase the coffee unless it checked these boxes. One, it had to be highland coffee. It had to be at least 800 meters above sea level or higher. And so we had to kind of pick and choose places that were appropriate for planting coffee, because there are a lot of villages that are in the lower lands, and again, those were the wealthier farmers anyway. They weren't in need of as much assistance. And so the best coffee actually goes to the people who need it the most, in a sense. And so the elevation has a lower average temperature, which helps the coffee fruits to take their time before they ripen. If you count the number of days or weeks or months between the time that the coffee blooms, the flowers bloom, and until the time when the coffee fruits, which we call cherries, ripen, the longer that time is, the more time the seed inside the coffee bean, it's actually not a bean, it's a seed. So the more time that the seed inside the coffee cherry has time to go through that metamorphosis of hardening and becoming a higher, denser bean, which improves its quality. And so coffee that ripens fast is going to be lower grade coffee. And so the elevation keeps the temperatures cool, makes the ripening cycle happen, be extended, and so that gives you a lot higher quality coffee.
Wow.
And so that's kind of the reason why we shot for, the elevation, 800 meters, is really not that high, but it kind of is a function of latitude as well. So like if you're on the equator, 800 meters is probably too low. You need to be over 1,000 or 1,200. But we were 19 degrees north, in northern Laos. And so the average temperatures at 800 would compare to like 1,200 on the equator. And so that was our standard. Anything below that, we wouldn't plant. So that was elevation. That was our number one. The second one that we did was shade grown. And so shade grown is important for a number of reasons. One is that in the dry season, it helps to preserve the moisture of the soil. And so when you get off the equator and you go further north like we were, then you have an extended dry season where it's just not raining for several months. And so if you have coffee in the sun, the soil is going to dry out and it's going to really affect the trees. And so you have to either irrigate, which is really difficult for farmers to do when they're high up in the mountains, they don't have water resources, or you have to have shade, which helps to preserve the moisture of the soil. And coffee, originates from Ethiopia. It is an understory crop, understory tree that prefers shade anyway. And another reason why shade is important is because coffee is a unique tree in that most trees, if they're under stress, will drop their fruits to preserve their leaves. Coffee is the opposite. It actually will drop its leaves to preserve its fruit. And so in the sun, it produces too much fruit. And then when the dry season hits, then it drops all of its leaves and all you have is left over is the fruit, which might sound good, except the next year there's no new growth. And so you totally will devastate your crop unless you have, external inputs like irrigation and fertilizer and things like that, which is really difficult for the upland farmers to do. And so shade grown was just the way to go. In terms of the environment, shade grown helps to preserve the forest. It helps to preserve the erosion. It helps to mitigate erosion and preserve the land. And it helps to provide a habitat for wildlife. And so you have like bird-friendly coffee is all shade-grown coffee. And so there's many good effects. Also, it helps to mitigate pests as well. A lot of pests that bother coffee trees do so when it's in sun, but when in shade, they don't bother them as much. It helps to protect the trees against frost as well, because the dew will fall from the sky and it'll freeze and destroy the coffee trees. But when you have a shade canopy over it, it actually will protect the trees from any frost damage in the coldest time of the year. So yeah, those are all that's cool. The biggest thing really is not to let the coffee trees overproduce. And one is for the health of the tree. And also if a coffee tree overproduces, it's like it only has so much flavor it can spread around to all the different cherries. And so if you keep the number of fruits or cherries on the trees to a more manageable level, then you get higher quality cherries as well. And so that's important. So elevation, shade grown, organic. That was also very important.
I was going to ask about that because it seems like a lot of those practices that you're doing with the elevation, the shade grown, are naturally eliminating some of the needs for inputs.
That's right. That's exactly right. And really for, again, considering the context of the farmers that we were working with, to import, those inputs, to go into the city and buy fertilizers is just something that's kind of out of their capability, just in terms of infrastructure, but also in terms of economics. They just couldn't afford, to bring in those kind of fertilizers. And so on one hand, that was good for us because that, we didn't have to go around and tell people stop using these chemical fertilizers, because they couldn't afford them anyway. And so that made it easier for us to have organic coffee. On the other hand, if you use a lot of chemical fertilizer inputs, it's going to degrade the soil quite significantly. And we've seen other big, Chinese companies come in, use those methods, and after a few years, it's just, it's just a mess. And so we, for the long-term sustainability of the coffee, and also for the benefit of the environment and the health of the, coffee drinkers, the end users, we went all organic. And we actually got in Laos organic certification from a Laos certification board as well. That was important. So yeah, those things. We only did Arabica. We didn't do any Robusta because Arabica is just a higher quality coffee species. Elevation, shade grown, organic. Those were kind of our thing.
Yeah, that's great. Well, when you think about the shape of coffee these days, you hear terms like third wave coffee, right? and there's an emphasis on very high grade coffee that is ethically sourced. And it seems like that fits in really well with what you're trying to do is you actually think about the grower, the person that is going to be your supplier, and making sure that it's a sustainable system for them as well. So I guess one question would be, where do you see the coffee trade going? Where do you see the coffee industry going? What do you think needs to? What are more ways that we can grow?
Yeah, I think the coffee industry is very unique because I think it has gotten a lot more attention than so many other industries that people just don't think about. But in terms of like workers' rights, farmers' rights, ethically sourcing materials, I mean, I've heard of that in a few other industries, but not as much as coffee. Mm-hmm. And I think with good reason. As you've probably heard, coffee is the second most traded commodity in the world, behind oil, second only to oil in terms of cash dollars. But the difference between coffee and oil is that, you don't get all these smallholder players in the oil business. It's pretty much the entry level is millionaire and up, But with coffee, you got people, everyday people can do coffee at some level, it seems like, whether it's a farmer or, someone who gets a coffee shop, or like myself having a little roastery here in Louisville, Kentucky, Yeah,
I've got a little air roaster that I roast like a third of a pound at a time at home.
That's right.
So even I'm doing it in a very small way.
That's right. And so there's just a lot more people in the coffee business. You have your big coffee and you have your specialty coffee. And so I think that with the attention that the coffee business and the coffee industry has in the West, there's a lot of attention being paid to, what is ethical at source, what is ethical at origin. And I think there's, some issues or problems with that, but I think overall it's a good thing. It starts this conversation about what really helps. For a long time, the fair trade movement was really prominent in trying to address the inequity of coffee farmers and coffee consumers who pay $4 or $5 for a cup of coffee. How much of that money is going back to the farmers?
Because you see coffee trading for like a couple of bucks, $2 to $3 a pound. So, if it's $2 to $3 a pound, why is my cup of Joe $5?
Yeah, exactly. And there's, obviously I've been involved with the coffee business from everything from planting the seeds to brewing coffee. We had a couple of coffee shops, espresso roastery or espresso cafes in the city in Laos where we live. And so I understand that on the service side, a lot of those costs aren't just the coffee beans, it's the service, the employees, everything else, the electricity that goes into the cost of that. I understand that. But at the same time, it is a good motive, I think, to try to move more of that value to the producers. And so I'm in agreement with that. I don't know that fair trade always accomplishes that. In fact, I know that it fails often because really where it's moving, this is kind of my answer, is where the coffee industry is moving is increasing the quality. The fair trade approach has good intentions, but it's basically extrinsically trying to give coffee or value to the coffee. And so what happens is people have coffee that's really good, very high quality. They can sell at a price much higher than fair trade, so they don't sell as fair trade. And so the coffee that's really bad, that doesn't taste good, they sell that to the fair trade market.
Really?
And so
that's fascinating.
So what has happened is a lot of times is a lot of the lower grade coffee actually gets dumped off on the fair trade market.
Wow.
Whereas the coffee that is very high quality, it commands a higher price than what fair trade will pay. And so it's actually, floating on its own, so to speak. And so I think a lot of people have written about this and discussed this dynamic in the fair trade movement. But I think the answer really isn't in, external, trying to give value extrinsically, but in intrinsically improving the quality of coffee. And so I think that's kind of where the movement is now at source, where a lot of producers are like, how can we improve our quality of our coffee? And that starts at where you plant it. Is it elevation? Is it shade? Is it organic? It starts with the coffee stock, the kinds of trees, the varieties, the cultivars that you're planting. Certain cultivars are better than others. And then, are you using shade, which I mentioned? And then the process, how do you process it? Honey processing has become very popular lately.
Yeah, I had some honey process just a few months ago. I thought it was awesome. You know, it was a different type of coffee I hadn't tasted before.
Yeah, it definitely imparts a certain acidity to the coffee, you know, that tanginess flavor that you don't normally get. I mean, traditionally you have the dry or natural process where you just take the cherries and dry it in the sun, and the wash process where you soak it and then wash off the mucilage from the beans, which is what we did with our coffee. And then you have the honey process, which takes a lot, if done right. You know, you can do it wrong, but if you do it right, it takes a lot more attention to the beans and produces a very unique flavor. And so those processing methods will affect the flavor of the coffee. And, you know, and Sumatra is known for their wet hold process, which gives that Sumatra a very unique taste for Sumatran coffees. And so, you know, improving the processes, you know, if you look on our wall over here, you'll see a coffee, maybe you can take a picture of it later on.
Sure.
You see a coffee ripening stage kind of poster there. And we use that to help our farmers to understand how to pick only the ripe coffee cherries, because coffee cherries don't ripen all at the same time. And so it's easy just to go up there and strip pick, but then you get a lot of underripe cherries, overripe cherries, along with the ripe cherries in the bag, and that really degrades the quality of the coffee. And so if you can pick just the ripe cherries, that's one of the biggest things that farmers can do to improve their cupping score of their coffee, is only focus on picking the ripe cherries. And so, yeah, different things like that will help improve the quality of the coffee.
Very good. Very good. So,
and you know, as the quality improves, then the price will improve, and that's going to have a better effect on their economics.
Yeah, and it seems like the things that you're talking about, planting the right plant in the right spot. I'm a certified arborist, and I've had a lot of experience in the landscaping industry, and it's the same sort of thing. You have to have the right plant in the right spot. If you put the wrong plant in the wrong spot, if you put a giant oak right next to the corner of your house, you're going to have foundation problems, and you're going to be competing with that oak for real estate, right? So it seems like those things, those are really easy things for a farmer to implement. It's not a very expensive process. You don't have to buy the name brand fertilizers and install an irrigation system, which could cost tens of thousands. It's just better cultural practices.
I mean, there are certainly humps to get over. I started out promoting coffee cultivation to upland farmers in 2006. And, we kind of hit our heads against some brick walls early on that we weren't expecting, just because we were new at it. We're trying to figure out how to do this. And one of the things that's very important to understand in this kind of situation is that when you're dealing with subsistence farmers, they have to live, they have to eat. And coffee, you plant it, it takes 3 years before you get their first harvest. And so they can't just give up on everything they're doing, plant coffee, and go all in, because they got to eat this year, And to plan 3 years in advance, for people who are wealthy and have financial security, that doesn't seem all that long. But for someone who's living year to year in a subsistence agriculture kind of context, 3 years from now is forever. And so they have to worry about this year. And so what would happen is we would give coffee trees to farmers, and they'd say, well, we'll try it, but, if I have to wait 3 years before I get paid, they don't want to invest the time and the energy to do it really the way it needed to be done. And especially when they're not sure, they've never seen anybody make money off of coffee before where we were planting. And so, how do they know that I'm not just tricking them into doing something?
Sure.
How do they know that the price I'm telling them I will pay will be the price 3 years from now?
Sure.
And they've been lied to before by other, outsiders who came through saying, here, plant this, and we'll come back and buy it for this price. And then when they harvest it, no one ever shows up. Or when they show up and they say, oh, I'm sorry, I can only give you a tenth of what we said because the market's dropped, And so there's a lot of, suspicion of any outsider that comes in. So that was one of the hurdles that we had to jump. And it really kind of started to take off after 3 years, when the other people start seeing us paying money to the farmers, and they actually saw the cash on the barrelhead, so to speak. And they're like, okay, these guys are for real. They've been talking, but now we see, the money being handed over in the village to the farmers who planted the coffee. And so that's when they started to believe, okay, this is legit. And then when we gave a price that was 3 times of what we originally promised, just because I didn't want to overpromise in the beginning, and the market was growing. That's when the excitement started to build, and there was more momentum for planting coffee, and then it's just kind of taken off. But there were several hurdles, and just the fact that people can't just immediately switch from planting upland rice to coffee. It takes years to get to that point.
Yeah. So so in that transition period, are they still, using rice? Are they still planting rice up until the point where, you're just like building a percentage of their farm out? Is that what you're doing? Just trying to, by percentage, take over more and more land?
Yeah. And coffee cultivation. So if you take a field that's already been cleared to plant rice or corn or Job's tears, you can't just plant coffee in it because there's no shade.
No shade, yeah.
And so you kind of have to let that. I mean, normally it's shifting agriculture. So even when they plant rice or corn, they'll plant it for a year, maybe 2, but usually just 1 year, and then they let it go fallow. Mm-hmm. And it just depends how quick it overgrows. But that could be anywhere from 3 years to 12 years before they'd come back and plant that field. So they're cutting and slash and burn, different fields on the mountainside every year in a cycle. And so if you get these fields that have been let go for 4 or 5 years and are already kind of regrowing, you can kind of go in and cut out the undergrowth, and usually there's enough shade to begin to plant the coffee. And if the coffee trees get a little bit extra sun in the early years, it actually helps the coffee trees grow. But by the time it has fruits, you want it to have, good 60-70% shade coverage to have good quality coffee. And so yeah, they can't, they still have to eat, they still have to feed their families.
Sure.
And so they can't, our goal was to get each family up between 2 or 3 hectares worth of coffee in full production. That would lift them out of poverty. But if they're only planting maybe half hectare max per year, then it's going to take them, it would take probably, if someone did everything right and did well, it would still take them probably about 7 or 8 years before they would get to that point. And, when you have different climate or, droughts or storms or other issues in the family go on, it's going to take a decade probably to move somebody to that point where they can really identify themselves as a coffee farmer rather than a rice farmer,
Yeah.
And so it's not a silver bullet. It's not an overnight quick fix, but nothing really that lasts usually is.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it takes time to get to that point.
So about how many coffee plants do you have an acre then?
Well, we over in most of the world obviously uses hectares rather than acres.
Okay.
And so I
American.
And I don't know, that's fine. I think it's like 2 point something acres per hectare. So I don't know the exact conversion there. But a hectare is 100 meters by 100 meters. So if you had a perfect square, 100 meters.
What even is a meter? I'm kidding.
A meter is more than a yard. So we would plant. There's different ways to plant coffee. We would, in general, we would tell them for upland fields to plant 2 meters by 2 meters. To plant 1 tree. And so if you have a lot better soil, a little bit flatter land, or if you have more inputs, fertilizer, whether it's organic or not, then you can plant them closer. But we would just kind of recommend 2 by 2. And so 1 hectare will give you 2,500 trees.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
So if you have 3 hectares, you're talking about 7,500 trees.
Wow. Very good. So tell me a little more about yourself. What is your favorite coffee?
Wow.
What do you like?
People ask me that all the time, and it kind of depends on my mood,
Okay.
So, we have 8 different coffees that we offer on our website now, and once my loud coffee comes in, we'll have number 9. And if I didn't like them, I wouldn't be selling any of them. I've tasted lots of coffees from around the world, and there's plenty that I've said, I'm not going to sell this,
Mm-hmm.
And so I do like all of our coffees. I would highlight, I can't wait till we get our loud coffee back in. That has just a real smooth, almost a molasses. We had Kenneth Davids, who does the, I don't know if you've seen Kenneth Davids' website. He does, he's written several books about coffee. He does the coffee cupping, and he evaluates different coffees. He gave high marks to our saffron coffee and described it as a light syrupy texture with notes of a molasses and dark chocolate. And I don't know if he's had tamarind before, but when we roast it a little bit lighter, I get that dark, sweet tamarind kind of flavor in it, but not overpowering by any means. Just a real, that kind of compares to what he describes as molasses, I would say. And so that's definitely one of my favorites is from Laos. We're getting some coffee from Yunnan, China, which is the southernmost province in China. And it's from the Pu'er area, which is known for its fine tea. And it's interesting because most people have not heard of Chinese coffee. And this coffee comes from the land of tea. And it's very tea-like in its flavor, actually. It has, I describe it as fruit and spice and tea. And we light roast that. Very unique, unlike any other coffee I've had, If it's so I really like that too. I would probably drink that in a French press. I wouldn't make an espresso out of that. I would make espresso out of our Thai coffee or our Lao coffee. We also have some coffee from Ethiopia, which is very bright and fruity, florally. And that's one I like a lot too. But then, I spent a lot of time putting together what we call our Kingdom Bean blend, which is designed for espresso.
Okay.
And most people have had this misconception, really, that espresso blends need to be very dark roasted. Mm-hmm. And there's some reasons for that. There's some good reasons for that, because if you take a light roast coffee and extract it with espresso, sometimes it'll pull out the really sour aspects. But if you use the right coffees, in my opinion, I think a medium to medium dark roast actually makes a better, superior espresso than a really dark roast does. And so our espresso roast isn't a super dark roast, but it's a mixture of coffees from, South America, from Sumatra. We have some of that in there, and some East African coffee as well. And that's really the one that I'm into the most right now. And that's our best seller by far too.
Good. Well, I like that you're focusing on a little bit lighter roast. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what got me into home roasting my own beans. I had a friend who made some Ethiopian Yirgacheffe that was just really fruity, super fruity, just tasted like blueberry juice. Yeah. And, when you do really, really dark roasts, you lose a lot of those natural flavors. So, that was part of what got me into doing my own thing was, I wanted to have lighter roast coffee and explore the flavors that are, natural to the bean.
Right.
And then, what I found is, I'm not using, creamer and sugar, because you just get all those natural flavors that are sweet and exciting, and if you put a bunch of other things in there, it kind of overshadows them.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I tell people that all coffee will taste the same if you roast it dark enough. And that is, it'll taste like charcoal, because that's what it is. It becomes charcoal if you roast it dark enough. And that's when all coffee tastes the same. And so you get these big companies, who are sourcing coffee from all these places around the world that taste quite different. And they want their customers to have the same experience. They want to have that consistency.
Sure. That
no matter which shop of this company that you go into around the world, you get the same tasting product. And so the way to do that is to roast it really dark. Yeah. And you roast it really dark. And a lot of these coffee drinks that people are drinking, they're putting in the milk, they're putting in the caramel syrup, they're putting in the sugar.
It's about all those other things with a little bit of caffeine in it.
That's right. It's kind of a coffee flavored,
exactly.
Sugar drink.
Yeah.
And so to them, the uniqueness of the cultivars and the regions and the distinctiveness of those coffees isn't as important as their consistency for these big companies. So that's why, it's really hard, I think, for big companies to compete in terms of actual coffee quality and flavor with the little guys, mm-hmm. who can do micro roast and really fiddle with different things and give you some amazing, single origin coffees. Obviously, the big guys, they have the marketing bucks. So they're the ones who can put those commercials out there that just make the mass public go, wow, they're so good at what they do.
Yeah. Well, that's part of the reason why I'm doing my website, is to find people like you who are doing micro roast coffee. So it's like, okay, if I'm in Louisville, Kentucky, where can I get a good cup if I'm just traveling through? Because as you alluded to, if you're going to a big chain brand, there's as a business model, it makes a lot of sense to offer consistency across every store. But from kind of a artisan standpoint, where can we find coffee that really brings out the natural flavor in the beans? Yeah. And I just love that. That's kind of, again, my personal passion. I remember once I started really getting into coffee, I first got into French roast coffee.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it's so smoky, so dark.
Yeah.
And then I had some really well roasted beans. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much flavor here. Why am I not exploring that?
Yeah, and it's interesting. Obviously there's there's an objective aspect to what is coffee quality. I mean, you can objectively, I think people can objectively agree on, this is what bad coffee is, this is what good coffee is, but there's definitely a subjective aspect to it too. Different people like different things,
Mm-hmm.
and so part of it is just the individual preferences of people. Part of it is people don't have a lot of experience with higher quality coffees.
Sure.
And there's, part of our human nature sometimes is if something's different, we immediately want to reject it. And so we've definitely experienced that when people taste a lighter roasted, coffee that is a little bit brighter, has a little bit more interesting flavor, and people are just used to their gas station coffee, sometimes they'll be like, whoa, I don't like that, and why would I pay, more for that when I can get this for a few pennies, But really, if you take time drinking it black and appreciating it, I think people will get converted, so to speak, to a more objective understanding of why this coffee actually is really special and really good tasting too.
Good. So, David, we're kind of coming to the close of our interview here, but can you tell me what is next for Kingdom Bean Coffee? I know that you guys just redesigned your image, right? Your logo.
That's right. Yeah, we got started. I lived over in Southeast Asia for 15 years and started and ran the coffee company there. It's still going strong with my colleagues who are running it there. Moved to Louisville about 3 years ago and just started Kingdom Bean Coffee Roastery last summer, so summer of 2018. And at the time, we were just juggling so many different things to get it all together. And I knew at some point that we would do a redesign of our logo and our branding. And so that has just happened. And so we already come out with a new logo. We're coming out with some new bags and type labels to better communicate, what kind of coffees that we have. What's next is we're really just trying to grow our market right now. We're selling mostly online and at events like where I met you at the market downtown. And we really want to get into coffee shops, into restaurants, into retail outlet stores, and put our coffee in places where people can access it a lot easier, more than just having to go online.
Good.
And so, trying to grow our brand that way, and also share. I want people to buy Kingdom Bean Coffee because it tastes great. Because I think at the end of the day, people, what they want is when they drink some coffee, they want it to taste good. They want that good experience. And I want to deliver on that. And I believe our coffee does deliver on that. On top of that, our coffee has a story to it. I only source coffee from ethical initiatives and social enterprises around the world. And it's very important to me to have that direct relationship with the producers, like my old company in Southeast Asia. To have that direct trade, that direct relationship where I am confident that when I give coffee to somebody, that it's actually doing good at source, at origin. And that's very important. That's what Kingdom Bean Coffee Company is all about. But that's not to set aside quality,
Yeah.
I don't want people to say, our coffee tastes bad, but it's doing good, so buy it anyway.
Right.
That's not our marketing approach at all. Quality comes first, and it's kind of like gravy or icing on the cake, that this coffee is also making a positive impact.
Great. So you already mentioned buying online. If somebody wants to buy your coffee, where can we find you? What's your website again?
It's kingdombeancoffee.com.
Kingdombeancoffee.com.
Yeah, and we have our roasteries located here in J-Town. We're right off of Blankenbaker Avenue on Commonwealth Drive in J-Town. And so people can come by here. It's always best to contact me ahead of time because I'm in and out, and so it's best to make an appointment. But people are welcome to come by and see our roastery, see our shop, see our roasting machine, and love to give people a tour and share the story.
Awesome. Well, thank you for talking to me today,
All right.
and wish you well in your coffee endeavors.
Very good. Thank you very much.